everyone, and welcome to Constructed Chaos. Let's delve into your raw, unbridled, latent potential as a sorcerer in D&D 5e. Sorcerers set themselves apart from other magic users in several ways, but their story starts with an innate gift often conferred to them via blood and birthright. Not just anyone can become a sorcerer, but sometimes exposure to powerful magics or otherworldly influence can transform a person into one, instilling the seeds of cosmic ability into their very bones. However, not every individual handles the appearance of sorceress ability the same way. Some may proudly carry a family crest, indicative of some power in their bloodline, or others may seek to hide their strange and chaotic powers out of fear of persecution or judgment. Will you view your magical talents as a gift to hone or a curse to rid yourself of? The very origin of your power can be a major compelling factor in what drove your character to become an adventurer in the first place. There's a ton of really unique roleplay potential before we even get to the mechanics here. But speaking of mechanics, how might we want to stack our abilities as we roll up our sorcerer? Well, typically you'll want Charisma as your highest ability, followed by Constitution for some extra hit points and better concentration saves, followed by Dexterity for a better AC and Initiative bonus, Wisdom and Intelligence in any order next to help out with some of our skill checks and saving throws against enemy spells and abilities, and Strength in last since we're probably not going to be making much use of it. Now, as usual, keep in mind that this is just a typical layout for ability scores. It can be perfectly viable to do something else if you'd rather. I've just had the most success with my sorcerer builds this way. And with this in mind, we might want to consider a race with ability score bonuses aligning with this paradigm pretty closely. Options like the Tiefling, ASMR, Changeling, and Satyr are pretty good examples, but there are plenty of others. In fact, any race can do quite well if your table uses the custom origin rules from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. But that said, we should probably go ahead and cover our base level features. As a sorcerer, we'll get a 1d6 hit die, meaning that we'll begin with 6 hit points plus our Constitution modifier. So we'll probably want to hang out most often in the back with our pal the Wizard. We'll also start with proficiency in daggers, darts, slings, quarterstaffs, light crossbows, Constitution and Charisma saving throws, and any 2 skills out of Arcana, Deception, Insight, Intimidation, Persuasion, and Religion. As for equipment, we'll start with a light crossbow and 20 bolts or any simple weapon, a component pouch or an arcane focus, a Dungeoneer's pack or an Explorer's pack, and 2 daggers. With all that out of the way, we'll get access to our spellcasting right off the bat, for which our ability will be Charisma. So this means that our spell attack modifier will be our proficiency bonus plus our Charisma modifier, and our spell save DC will be that plus 8. This also means that our spellcaster will likely be somewhat adept at social encounters as well. With those numbers in mind, we'll be able to choose 4 cantrips and 2 first level spells at level 1 from the sorcerer spell list. And we'll have 2 first level spell slots to start out, but here's a chart of all that for later levels so we don't have to keep referring back to it. And we're still not done with our first level as we unlock our Sorceress Origin subclass from the very beginning. There aren't many classes that allow for this specifically, and that simple fact makes Sorcerer a great option for multiclass dips for a little extra magical ability and flavor. This origin will grant you additional abilities at 1st, 6th, 14th, and 18th level, but before we touch on what options are available to you, we may need to skip ahead a bit and cover the quintessential sorcerer features at 2nd and 3rd level. Beginning with Font of Magic, we'll make our first foray into sorcery points. We'll have just 2 of them to start, but we'll level into more of them as is indicated by the spell slot chart I put on the screen earlier. You may notice that the number of them you'll have will just be equal to your sorcerer level, but just know also that we can never have more points than what's listed here. The reason I mention this is that our current main use for sorcery points will be turning them into a spell slot and vice versa as a bonus action. Here's yet another chart to show you the relative worth of each slot as it relates to sorcery points. And you may notice that the largest spell slot we can use with this feature is one of 5th level. And before you get any ideas about generating infinite sorcery points and spell slots, any slots you create vanish when you finish a long rest, so that won't be possible. Unless you become a Warforged Warlock. Yeah, I'm talking about taking your Warlock spell slots which come back on a short rest and converting them into Sorcerer spell slots via your sorcery points. Warforged don't need sleep, so you could go without long resting and you just have all of the spell slots forever. You could also take the Warlock's Pact of the Tome invocation called Aspect of the Moon if you want to go without sleep as something other than a Warforged. But before you go too crazy in the comments, I know that this has been clarified in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Those rules state that you will take on a risk of exhaustion if you do not take a long rest every 24 hours. A long rest does not mean sleeping. So even if you don't need sleep, a long rest for you might look more like just keeping watch and taking a break for 8 hours every 24 hours. So why do I even mention this? Well, if you or someone else in your party has access to the Greater Restoration spell, you can cure yourself of said exhaustion and still get your infinite spell slots with even just one level in Warlock. Just do know that each casting of Greater Restoration will consume 100 gold pieces of diamond dust, earning this variant the nickname Cocainelock. Further, Wizards of the Coast has clarified outside of published material that sorcery points were only designed to be used with sorcerer spell slots. So, although this works in rules as written, most tables have it banned, for good reason. After all, having infinite spell slots would be undeniably broken. But don't worry, there's more fun to be had here. As my good friend Rob let me know in the comments of my Warlock video, there is a third version of this setup deemed the trancelock that often relies on the same Warlock multiclass as well as the trance feature of elven races that allows them to complete a long rest in just 4 hours. After this point, one would only need to spend the remaining 4 hours taking short rests and generating more spell slots. The result isn't infinite power, but it is one that's allowed at the majority of the games that I've played in, and can go a long way in helping you in other ways. Especially when you realize that there's much more to do with sorcery points than just turning them into spell slots. At 3rd level, we'll unlock the metamagic feature that allows us to change the nature of spells that we cast in various ways by expending sorcery points to do so. At this point, you can gain 2 options for doing this, but we'll be able to select one more at 10th and 17th level. These options can play a lot into how your sorcerer performs, and your mileage may vary pretty wildly depending on which subclass you choose, hence the reason that I wanted to cover this a bit first. Including the new options from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, there are 10 metamagics to choose from, starting with Careful Spell, which allows you to protect certain creatures within the range of a spell you cast that requires a saving throw from that spell. By spending 1 sorcery point, you may choose a number of creatures equal to your charisma modifier to protect, and those creatures automatically make the saving throw. This won't protect them from everything, of course, but it can be helpful if you want to throw a fireball in an area dense with enemies and allies alike. Next, Distance Spell simply allows you to double the range of a spell that has a range of 5 feet or greater in exchange for just 1 sorcery point. And spells that have a range of Touch can similarly be extended to 30 feet instead. Great for use with spells like Shocking Grasp, Firebolt, or even Thunderstep if you need to gain a lot of distance really fast. Empowered Spell does mostly what you think it would by allowing you to re-roll a number of damage dice up to your charisma modifier for a single sorcery point, and this is one of 2 options that you can actually stack with other metamagics, as you typically can only use 1 at a time. Extended Spell doubles the duration of spells that last for a minute or longer to a max of 24 hours for a sorcery point. This one isn't exactly one of my favorites, but could be useful in combination with spells like Mage Armor or Dark Vision in some niche scenarios. Heightened Spell touts a hefty cost of 3 sorcery points, but will force disadvantage on a creature that is forced to make a saving throw against a spell. This could be very useful in dire situations where you know a spell's success could be vital, perhaps with the use of Hold Person, Banishment, or even Polymorph. Quicken Spell is one of the more popular options that allows you to cast a spell with a casting time of 1 action as a bonus action instead. You might think that you could use this to cast another leveled spell as an action as well, but be careful. The rules state that you may only cast 1 leveled spell per turn, and that still applies here. So you could cast a cantrip with your action or possibly interact with a spell you're concentrating on like Witch Bolt or something similar. Subtle Spell tends to be a bit niche and allows you to spend a sorcery point to cast a spell without using verbal or somatic components. I can see this being used in social situations to cast Charm Person or Detect Thoughts without someone noticing that you're casting a spell. It could even be good for getting a last-minute fireball in before a tense conversation erupts into combat. And Twin Spell is one of my favorites, as it allows you to essentially make a copy of a spell that targets one creature and doesn't have a range of self. The cost may vary as the number of sorcery points you spend for this corresponds to the spell's level, but it can often be worth it. Haste in particular is a really fun option to use on your allies, but other offensive spells can be good as well. Seeking Spell from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is another metamagic that can be stacked like Empowered Spell, and allows the user to spend 2 sorcery points to re-roll the d20 on a missed spell attack roll. Considering that many spells require saving throws and the somewhat high cost of 2 sorcery points, I'm not sure this one would be extremely useful, but the use case itself should be pretty obvious. Finally, we have Transmuted Spell. Also from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, this metamagic allows you to change a spell that deals acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, or thunder damage in such a way that it deals another one of those damage types. This has some uses that I'll mention later, but in general, I can see this being used to change the damage types of spells that deal poison and fire damage since they're so often resisted by enemies. But now, the most powerful metamagic of all, Subscribe Spell. This allows the viewer to support the channel by casting like and subscribe for free. Yep, this costs you 0 sorcery points, so you might as well just do it. Thanks. Jokes aside, we're finally able to rewind to the subclasses available to you at your first level. I won't be able to go into excruciating detail here, but I'll make sure to link any videos that I make in the future that go over more detail about each subclass option. So first up, the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer has been given psionic powers after being exposed to or born connected to some alien influence. Such powers may have manifested after an encounter with a terrible foe from the far realm, or could even stem from some unknown connection that has persisted through your lineage after an ancestor took a trip to the astral plane. And with all this mind-warping flavor comes a list of extra spells you get to learn without counting them against the total number you can know as a sorcerer. These spells include some really great options like Mind Sliver, Dissonant Whispers, Hunger of Hadar, and Avard's Black Tentacles. But what a lot of people forget is that you may swap out one of these spells with another of the same level each time you gain a level in the sorcerer class. This new spell can only be an evocation or divination spell from the sorcerer, wizard, or warlock spell lists, but as you might imagine, that opens up quite a few possibilities. Also at first level, you'll gain the ability to speak telepathically with another creature up to 7 miles away as a bonus action for a number of minutes equal to your sorcerer level, so long as you two share a language. There's no real limit to the number of times you can use this, and it can be pretty useful for creative players that seek to influence the minds of NPCs or simply want to keep in touch with other party members without drawing any attention. From there, you'll gain abilities that allow you to cast your psionic spells with a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level without verbal, somatic, and in some cases, material components, and grant you resistance to psychic damage and advantage on saving throws against being charmed or frightened. You'll even be able to transform yourself as a bonus action with the ability to see invisible creatures, gain a flying speed with hover, gain a swimming speed with the ability to breathe underwater, or gain the ability to move through a 1-inch space and spend 5 feet of movement to escape from non-magical restraints or grapples. Finally, at 18th level, you can teleport as an action to a space you can see within 120 feet while leaving behind a destructive wake, as each creature within 30 feet of the space you left takes 3d10 force damage as they're pulled inwards against a strength save for half damage and no pulling effect. The extra spells alone make this one of the best sorcerer subclasses, but adding in all that awesome flavor, the ability to fly, and a great telepathic ability right out of the gate make this a no-brainer pick. Moving along to the other entry from Tasha's, the Clockwork Soul offers some similarly powerful features for our sorcerer. This particular variety, however, errs more on the side of order rather than chaos. Your power comes from a mechanical magic influence that bolsters efficiency and reliability. Beginning at first level, you'll also learn some extra spells like Aid, Dispel Magic, Greater Restoration, and Wall of Force. And just like before, you can swap out those spells as you level up, so long as the new spell is an Abjuration or Transmutation spell from the Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard spell list, giving you access to the coveted counterspell along with several other great options. Seriously, knowing extra spells is just never not good. Also at first level, you can negate the effects of advantage or disadvantage on a d20 roll from any creature you see within 60 feet of you as a reaction. And you can do so proficiency bonus times per long rest. That's pretty handy to have at just first level, let alone over the course of your entire campaign. From that point, you'll gain abilities that allow you to ward yourself or another creature within 30 feet as an action by expending your sorcery points, to enter a state of being for a minute as a bonus action that negates advantage on attack rolls against you and allows you to treat any d20 roll of a 9 or lower as a 10 on an attack roll, ability check, or a saving throw, and at 18th level, summon Spirits of Order within a 30-foot cube as an action to restore up to 100 hit points divided as you choose, repair any damaged objects, and end every spell of 6th level or lower on creatures within the cube. The combination of these awesome abilities that reshape the fabric of reality by twisting the mechanics of the game and the added spells known that can be swapped into even better options make this one of the best and most broken spellcasters out there, let alone the best sorcerer subclass. Some of you in the comments may disagree in favor of our next entry, however, and I'll explain myself in just a moment. Up until Tasha's, the Divine Soul Sorcerer reigns supreme as the undisputed best option for the class. This type of sorcerer draws on their innate connection to a godlike being, whether that be an angel in your family lineage, or a gift bestowed to you by some powerful entity in exchange for your servitude on the material plane. Beginning at first level, you'll be able to add 2d4 to any failed saving throw or missed attack roll that you make once per short or long rest, and you'll gain access to the entire cleric spell list when swapping out your spells as you level, as well as an extra spell based on the nature of your divine magic, choosing from good, evil, law, chaos, and neutrality for either cure wounds, inflict wounds, bless, bane, and protection from evil and good respectively. Obviously, some of these options stand out as better than others, but once again, having extra spells, regardless of what you choose, is a great boon to the sorcerer's utility. However, you may notice that there is no larger list of known spells added for this subclass as there were for our last two entries. Well, this is exactly why the Divine Soul and the other sorcerer subclasses we're about to cover can't really make up the difference here, and why I don't believe the Divine Soul Sorcerer is the best option any longer. That said, the subclass is still extremely powerful, with abilities that allow you to bolster the healing effects of spells used on you and your allies with your sorcery points, gain a nearly indefinite flying speed as a bonus action, and regain half of your hit points as a bonus action once per long rest. All these abilities are decent enough, but I worry I may have glossed over the best part of this subclass, gaining access to the cleric spell list. With access to spells like Spirit Guardians and Spiritual Weapon on your sorcerer, you can do a real number on your enemies, and the combination of metamagics like Twin Spell and options on this list like Revivify or Animate Dead is simply fantastic. This subclass may be playing second fiddle to the Clockwork Soul and Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, but it's one hell of a fiddle player still. But now, let's take a look at the Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer as we continue to work our way backwards through the published D&D material. As the very first sorcerer subclass from the player's handbook, you will have gained your magical power via the very essence of dragons, whether that be a gift dispensed directly to your character or possibly some ancient ancestor's connection. As your abilities manifest, you'll choose a type of draconic ancestor from this list that corresponds to a damage type that will affect the way your features operate. Additionally, you'll gain an extra hit point for each level you have in the class, learn Draconic, and gain double proficiency in charisma checks made when interacting with a dragon. And you'll even get to bolster your AC with dragon-like scales for a static 13 plus your dexterity modifier. And that's all at first level. As you go along, you'll be able to empower spells that deal the same damage associated with your ancestry, gain resistance to that same damage type for an hour using one of your sorcery points, spawn a set of draconic wings as a bonus action for a flying speed, and even channel the potent persona of your bloodline to cause enemies within 60 feet of you to be charmed or frightened. Although that last ability does cost 5 sorcery points and concentration, resulting in it being fairly useless by the time it comes online, this subclass can stand on its own fairly well in the right scenarios and depending on what damage type you choose for your Draconic ancestry. For example, a red dragon ancestry can give you a lot of options when it comes to choosing spells that deal extra damage, but also locks you into one pretty one-dimensional combat style that will commonly be resisted or even outright ineffective on some monsters. Making use of the transmuted spell Metamagic from Tasha's will help to some degree, but you may still be fighting a bit of an uphill battle. All in all, it's probably best to take a bit of extra time at the start to plan some of this out as a Draconic Sorcerer, but they can be a great fit for a dragon-centric campaign. Next, Shadow Magic Sorcerers draw their power from the Shadowfell, and they have their soul imbued with a strange energy that manifests in chilling appearances and hair-raising quirks. Channeling that power at just first level, you'll be able to cling to life by making a charisma saving throw once per long rest if it succeeds, and gain a dark vision with a range of 120 feet. And at third level, you'll learn the darkness spell and will be able to see through that darkness so long as you cast the spell using 2 sorcery points instead of one of your spell slots. Later on, your sorcerer will be able to call forth the Hound of Ill Omen as a bonus action by spending 3 sorcery points to attack and force a target to have disadvantage against your spell saves. Gain the ability to teleport from one shadow to another as a bonus action, and eventually transform yourself into a shadowy being for a minute that gives you resistance to all damage but force and radiant, and allows you to move through other creatures and objects as if difficult terrain for 6 sorcery points. While somewhat reliant on the availability of shadows in their environment for teleporting, Shadow Magic Sorcerers come in as a really powerful option and boast some fantastic tools for various scenarios, including the ability to see in your own darkness for advantage on attacks, as well as a brutal Hound of Ill Omen combo with Hold Person or Hold Monster that can feel completely broken against single enemy combats. I think this one is sometimes a bit underrated, so it's definitely worth checking out. Moving on, Storm Sorcery booms in with some absolutely awesome flavor resulting from your bloodline mingling with the magics of creatures of the air like the Jinn, or simply having found yourself exposed to the powerful forces of a raging storm. Perhaps you were even struck by lightning. At first level, you'll learn Primordial and gain the ability to fly up to 10 feet without provoking opportunity attacks as a bonus action immediately before or after casting a spell of first level or higher. Despite the wording, this doesn't really allow you to hover 10 feet in the air, but it can be nifty to get some distance between enemies and you that have gotten a bit too close for comfort. Afterwards, starting from 6th level, you'll gain resistance to lightning and thunder damage and the ability to deal out extra damage to creatures of your choice within 10 feet when you cast a spell that deals one of those types of damage, attain the ability to subtly influence the weather around you, learn to deal lightning damage as a reaction to being hit with a melee attack and possibly push them 20 feet back, and eventually gain outright immunity to lightning and thunder damage along with a 60-foot flying speed that you can diminish to 30 feet to spread that flying speed to allies near you. While some of the flight-based abilities offer some interesting battlefield maneuverability, the Storm Sorcerer is one that seems to want to be fairly close to your enemies while remaining somewhat evasive and shilling out reaction damage whenever they're hit. Moreover, their flight doesn't come online until 18th level, whenever most of your party members will have already had access to this for some time. This subclass can leave a bit to be desired, but is also quite fun to play, especially whenever multiclassed into something like the Tempest Domain Cleric. And now we round out our options with one of my personal favorites in Wild Magic. True to its namesake, raw chaotic energy is what gives this sorcerer their magic abilities. And that power could have come from nearly anywhere, from a fae or demon, an elemental, or a creature from the far realm. Your magic could even have manifested from some odd defect in your birth, a la X-Men. Beginning at first level, you'll roll an extra d20 every time you cast a sorcerer spell of first level or higher. If the result of that roll is a 1, you'll roll a d100 to determine the effects that take place from a Wild Magic surge table, as your magic spirals out of control. The effects are a mixture of good and bad, offering anything from turning yourself into a potted plant to summoning a unicorn to aid you. Also at first level, you'll be able to give yourself advantage on an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw by channeling the wild magic energy within you. While this is only usable once per long rest, after that point, the DM can have you roll on the wild magic surge table immediately after you cast a leveled sorcerer spell and have you regain the use of the feature as a result. Advantage on command at first level? Awesome! As you learn to live with the churning chaos within you, you'll eventually gain the ability to bolster or hinder other creatures you can see by adding or subtracting 1d4 to an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw they make as a reaction and using 2 sorcery points. Later, you'll even unlock features allowing you to somewhat control your wild magic surges by making 2 rolls and choosing between them, and bolster the damage of the spells you cast when you max out any one of the damage die you roll. The design of the Wild Magic Sorcerer is one that truly transcends the typical number crunching mechanics, as it is just so fun to play. I'm probably a bit biased here, but it is important to point out that the subclass can function extremely well or extremely poorly at times depending on what you roll with your wild magic surges, even though most of the effects could be considered good. And although things start to fall off a bit with your abilities in later levels, the subclass comes on really strong early on because of the access to some pretty broken effects at random. No matter if you're casting a fireball on yourself and your party or regaining all of your sorcery points at once, you'll definitely remember the one time you played that wild magic sorcerer. Finally, moving back to our base class features, we'll find that for the most part, we'll just continue learning new spells, gaining more sorcery points, and increasing our abilities with score improvements at 4th, 8th, 12th, 16th, and 19th level as we go along. But beginning at 4th level, we'll also have the opportunity to make use of an optional feature from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that allows us to replace one of the metamagics and one of the cantrips we've taken each time we get one of those ability score improvements. At 5th level, we'll have another optional feature called Magical Guidance that allows you to re-roll a failed ability check by spending 1 sorcery point. This one can actually be pretty good in certain situations, so if your DM allows it, I definitely recommend having that option available to you. Finally, our last base class feature comes online at 20th level and is called Sorceress Restoration. This simply allows us to regain 4 expended sorcery points whenever you finish a short rest, which can be helpful. However, I'll go on record as saying this isn't even close to the best capstone out there. By this point, you'll have 20 sorcery points, so 4 doesn't really seem like all that much help. But also by this point, you likely won't care that much. After all, you'll be slamming enemies with a number of potent metamagic fueled spells, generating infinite spell slots, and to great effect using the abilities of your subclass, of which there aren't really any bad options. All while making the other caster classes jealous that you didn't have to sing, study, or sell your soul for the power you were born with. So if you'd like a little more magic in your games, make sure to like the video and twin spell the subscribe button for more class guides and build videos like this. And until next time, go out there and make some chaos.